Welcome to the Reinventing the White Coat podcast, where we delve into conversations aimed at helping you foster a healthy relationship with your career and yourself. If you're a physician feeling unfulfilled or burned out or want to prevent yourself from going down that path, then this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jennifer Scher, pediatrician, chief wellness officer, and executive and life coach. Sit back and relax as we explore ways to live your best life and have a career in medicine. Welcome to another episode of Reinventing the White Coat. Before I introduce Dr. Michael Hersh, who's going to be today's guest, and I'm really excited, I want to share a quick something, call it a public service announcement or an advertisement, whatever, but it's really just something that I think will be useful to our listeners. A couple weeks ago, I was scrambling to put together my CME hours for my hospital recredentialing. And part of it, I logged into the Master Clinicians website. Master Clinicians is the company that produces this podcast. Thank you very much. But they also host the CME lectures that Allied, our medical practice that they run. And so I was in there, I was trying to pull up my certificates, and I started digging through the website, and I saw that there's a ton of content and a lot of it free. And they even have this like cool thing that kind of houses it. It's like a vault to organize it all. So I just want to shout out to people if you need CME or you need to get organized, because being organized is good for your well-being. Right, Michael? I just encourage you to go check out masterclinicians.net. So with that, I will move on to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have Dr. Michael Hersh, who grew up in my neck of the woods on Long Island. No longer here, but we have that in common. Michael is a full-time adult gastroenterologist currently in the Chicago area. But the reason I just had to have him on today is because the work that he does on the weekends and evenings is so important. In addition to his regular job and his personal life, he's a physician coach dedicated to supporting men. And I feel like, you know, in our culture where men are just trained and it's ingrained in them at such a young age to be tough and, you know, suck it up and hide the emotions, it's just so important to have someone like you, Michael, to work with this as if it's a small group of people. I mean, it's half of society, so it's not like you have some tiny little group you're working with. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, I love that introduction. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here with you today and just excited to chat with you about all the things.
Oh, great. So tell me maybe if you could start where I always like to start with your journey. You know, what got you where you are today?
Absolutely. So, as you have already alluded to, I'm a born and bred New Yorker who did college and med school in New York, and then through the match got transplanted to the Midwest. Always thought I would make my way back, and you know, life has other plans. So
Mhm.
here I am, more than 21 years after moving to the Midwest. And I had a very traditional medical education pathway. I went straight through college, med school, residency, GI fellowship. Met my wife when I was a fellow, moved to Chicago and started my career and hit the ground running. I joined a very small multi-specialty group and got busy very quickly and started to experience all of the things that go along with being a busy
Mhm.
clinician. Was offered all of the leadership gigs that a lot of new attendings are offered, so I got very involved in physician leadership and the medical executive committee, and really just the leadership of the medical group as the group grew and got taken over by the local community hospital. And then again, as that community hospital got taken over by an even larger system, I started to feel all of the things that go along with just the constant busyness and the pressures that go along with it. As my practice got busier, the wait list to get in to see me got busier. And I
Mhm.
started to get really overwhelmed by all of that. And then,
Hey, before
about,
you go on, Michael,
yes, for sure.
I wonder if when you were offered, because everyone's always offered those positions, right? Was it something that you were excited or interested about, or was it something you didn't know how to say no to and it felt like a burden?
Yeah. For me, so I was not technically voluntold as
Voluntold, right.
as many people are. I really thought that this could be an avenue of my career that I really wanted to lean into. I loved being involved in the decision making
Hmm.
and representing my peers. And even to this day, I've taken on the role of being kind of the lead GI physician and representing my colleagues.
Hmm.
And I do love those leadership positions. At a certain point, though, they weren't really meshing well with kind of what I saw for my career. Um, and you know, in the mix of all of this happening, obviously, I started my family. I now have two kids. And then I had an experience with medical malpractice,
Oof.
um, which a lot of physicians experience. And we
Yeah.
never really talk about the impact that
Hmm.
medical malpractice has on physicians.
It's
And it's so
huge.
common.
So huge. I'm really glad you bring that up because it's the one of those silent people are ashamed or embarrassed. So how did you deal with that?
Oh, awfully. I did. It it got to the very core of my identity and who I saw myself as. And it dragged on for about 2 years before it ultimately just went away. And I know we're always told as physicians, it's not about you, it's about the money. And then you just are supposed to move on with your
Hmm.
career, except that all of a sudden then work doesn't feel safe anymore.
Yes. Right. And you know what's crazy? The lawsuit could be on a case that, and I don't know the details of yours, but you could be sued for something that you did perfectly fine and just it was a really bad outcome, right? As opposed to sometimes you do things that are wrong and by the luck of, people do okay and that doesn't keep you up at night. It's just that it's something about that being that served and then it's that scarlet letter.
A
Yeah.
hundred percent, for
Yeah.
sure. And then so I navigated my way through that, not particularly well, but I got to the other side of it. Um, and then COVID happened.
Mm. The big C.
Right, exactly. The other big C.
Right.
And I think all of these things just culminated in my life. And that is when I saw people starting to talk about physician coaching. And I have to say, I think for female physicians, that conversation probably was going on a little bit earlier.
Hmm.
But there definitely were not a lot of male physicians or physicians in my circle that were talking about physician coaching as an option
Yeah.
for kind of how do you work through all of the career stress and struggles.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's special about men? I mean, you became a coach. Um, Tell me, what's so particularly challenging for men compared to us ladies over here?
Yeah. Well, I will say that before I became a coach, I obviously went through the coaching program. And I think that's where I identified where a lot of where the struggles that men in particular, like what the struggles are. And
Hmm.
for me, I think one of the biggest things I learned about myself was my inability to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
And I think that this is something that men are socialized to kind of wear their coat of armor and never really demonstrate their vulnerability in public.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, this was a tremendous challenge to allow myself to be seen by somebody else,
Yeah.
and it made all the difference.
Well, and then you have the double whammy that medicine, you're not supposed to be vulnerable, right?
100%.
So you
So
became vulnerable?
so I think there were ways where I would show up to coaching calls and talk about this utterly mundane thing that had happened at work and get to the other side of the coaching call, feel better about the issue that I had brought to coaching, and then be overwhelmed by this intense vulnerability hangover that I couldn't believe I just allowed myself to be seen for this thing that had happened at work that probably nobody else thought twice about.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when, so right, so I mentioned to you the stuff that brought me to coaching, but what kept me here was recognizing like, oh wow, this is something that really is worthwhile figuring out for me. Um, and then the other big thing that I will just add about what is challenging for men and for coaching is the ability to identify feelings. I think men are generally socialized to dissociate from our feelings,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're just trained like feelings are that thing over there that I just don't want to deal with. Um, and I thought before coaching that I had four possible feelings. I thought I could be angry, sad, mad, or frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody pulled out a feelings wheel and I saw all of the things that somebody could feel,
Yeah,
and I just mind blown.
right. But why is it important? Who wants to be vulnerable and feel and like why?
Fantastic question. Because everything you want in life, every goal you have, every dream, every motivation is because of how you think you're going to feel when you get there. And so feelings, we cannot escape them. Feelings impact every single part of every day for us. They impact our goals and our dreams. And if we are not more aware and intentional about what we're feeling and how we want to feel, then it makes it just so much more challenging to get through our days and then ultimately to get the things that we want.
It's interesting that you put it that way because it speaks to what I always talk to people about. That is, we're always trying to change our what's going on for us to be happy. And I'm not saying you shouldn't change your work circumstances, but you can sort of change the internal world while working on the external world. And you don't have to wait to get there. You have it within you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard to see that. We're very much fixers as doctors, and we think we can fix everything with outside fixes. Yeah. So what are your typical, what are your typical challenges that men come to work with you for?
Yeah. So I think what the struggles that men have with their careers are probably very similar to the struggles that female physicians experience. There is a tremendous amount of work dissatisfaction, and that largely is coming from a sense of a lack of control and autonomy at
Hmm.
work. Um, we're seeing, I see a lot of men who are looking to create more balance in their life, trying to figure out how do I do all the things and how do I feel like I'm spending enough time where I want to be spending time. And more than that, it's how do I be more present? How do I be at home with my family and be present with them and not constantly distracted and focused elsewhere? Those are some of the big things that come up.
Yeah. Do you find most people end up quitting?
Um, Actually, no. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to become a physician coach is because I would see on social media all of these like physician groups where everybody was looking for something else. They were looking for a side gig or what else could they do? And people were, right? Financial independence, retirement early, trying to save enough money so that they could just escape medicine. And my thinking was, and this was true for me as well, who I'm still a full-time practicing physician, was, many physicians are looking for something else or looking to leave medicine because they think that that's what is required to be happy.
Hmm.
And I have found that you don't actually need to leave medicine to be happy. We can make changes and create boundaries and make a career that it's so much easier to show up for every day. And that really genuinely has been my goal is to help physicians truly figure out what do they want. And if they want to leave medicine, that's fine.
Right.
But just to point out that you don't need to be happy. You can remain a clinically practicing physician and be happy if you
Yeah.
choose to.
I find wherever you go, there you are, as they say in the mindfulness world, right? So when you quit thinking that you're going to be happier, then you're somewhere else, still probably not that happy. Maybe a little
Yeah.
less stressed. um, but it's so our organization, we just did the AMA has those the well-being biopsy, the joint medicine. So we did this survey to see how well our people are. And as I'm going through the results, it was so actually inspiring to read they ask one question, they ask, what brings you joy at work? And answer after answer. I mean, people love to take care of their patients. They truly do. I mean, everything when the door is closed, everything in the exam room. And so the call is for the people in power and to remove the obstacles and to, you know, give the support so that we can just really do what we love. And I think we do have a little bit more power. Sometimes we feel so helpless and um, even when you're not a boss, you can usually pull a few things to make yourself feel a little bit more engaged. Um, I don't mean to monopolize.
No, I think that's so true. That has 100% been my experience, that when I took a step back from what my everyday looked like and started to figure out what makes my day more tolerable, what makes it easier to get through my day, I was able to enact changes that really made a tremendous difference. Some of them being as small as just asking for a lunch break on days that I was doing procedures. So
Hmm.
it really, we do have some control. We just have to figure out what do we actually want, and then how do we get it?
Yeah,
How do we make it
yeah.
happen?
One of the times that we were sort of chatting asynchronously, whether it was email or LinkedIn or something, we had a conversation about the book Quit
Yes.
versus Grit. And you shared something that really resonated with me that I remember about the book about the ants. Do you remember
Yes.
that
A
part?
100%. Yes.
Maybe you could share that and we could have a little conversation about that.
Yeah. So we're talking about, for those of you that don't know, it's a book called Quit, and it is written by Annie Duke, who was a professional poker player. And she, in the book, talks a little bit um, about quitting and the power of quitting. Um, and that is very counter culture, if you will, right? So we have a culture that is completely built on grit and perseverance. If you have a goal, you have to keep going no matter what to reach it, right? And grit really does serve us very well when we have a worthwhile goal in our future, and pushing through the obstacles to get to that worthwhile goal. Grit can really serve us. The problem with grit comes when that goal is no longer worthwhile.
Hmm.
And we continue to lean into the grit, like, I just have to get there. I just have to do it.
Yeah.
And if you are not looking at the other option, which is to quit, a lot of times you're spinning your wheels and leaning into the grit, and you're gonna end up in a place that really you don't really want to be in anymore.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the gist of the
Yeah.
book. And then to get to your ant reference, she talks a little bit about ants and exploiting versus exploring, right? So when ants find a food source, like, there's a picnic and somebody drops a slice of watermelon on the ground, the scavenger ants will find it and then send a trail. The other ants will follow the trail to exploit the food source, which is really good. And while most of the ants are headed to the watermelon on the ground, the ants know that at any point in time, a food source can be taken away. Somebody might come and pick up the watermelon slice and throw it away. And then all of a sudden, there's no food left. And
Hmm.
so even when they are exploiting a food source, the explorer ants are still scavenging, looking around for an even better food source. And if they find a better food source, then they will leave the watermelon slice behind and then move on to to the other food source. And I think this is so important for doctors. You don't have to leave your clinical work or your current job to be exploring other things that are interesting to you. Because until you are exploring and looking at other options and seeing what else is out there, you kind of have blinders on and you don't really, you're closed off to what else could be out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so never stop exploring, I think is the key. And that was a LinkedIn
Yeah.
post, I think that you,
Yeah, yeah. And I like the analogy or the metaphor that I heard somebody talk about, which almost like if you if you fester and you don't explore, it becomes this like pendulum. Do you want to be a wrecking ball and just like get so fed up that you quit it all and you just, gonna then go off and live in the Himalayas or whatever? Or do you want to walk on a balance beam and just sort of, teeter totter a little bit as you're going and kind of a little bit of test this out, test that, and then um, make the change or whatever, because we're not meant to be static, right? Even if you stay in your career, you might dabble with some leadership or do some teaching or we are not meant to just sort of be doing the same thing. Or if you're doing GI, you might start going into, I don't know what specialties you have within there, but with peds, we say, oh, let me do a little obesity. Let me do a little mental health. It's just, we need to change over time. The the quit have I wonder how that has I mean that has been a challenge for me. I don't know if that's shown up for you personally. And doctors, I think in general, we are very goal oriented. How do you see that for yourself or with your clients?
yeah. So in the book, they do actually talk about a physician who is exploring other career options. And, the point that is made, and this isn't verbatim, it's that when you tie your identity up with your work, then quitting becomes so much more challenging because you're
Mm,
not just quitting the position, you're quitting your identity. And
yeah.
it's so hard for physicians in particular who have created their whole identity around being a doctor to quit on that. And so it's important to adjust, and this has been part of my journey as well, to adjust, number one, how you see yourself and what is your identity. And number two, what does it mean? Is it if you decide that you don't want to do clinical medicine anymore, do you make that mean about yourself that you're not fulfilling your duty as a physician, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, of course, no, right? There are
Yeah.
so many things that physicians can do. And so I think for me, my personal journey has been just working on pivoting, like what is the identity? How do I see myself? And what
Mm-hmm.
does it mean to be a physician?
Yeah. This is one of those things, like I say, boys are ingrained with certain cultural expectations. It's this quit thing is, I see it in parents when we're talking about their kids. My kid he signed up for soccer and then he wants to quit, like as if it's like this horrible thing. You have to stick it out. You have to, don't let it, like sometimes I just wonder, I get like commitments and like, why do they want to quit? Like, what's going on? Do they have to do what you want them to do, or are we letting them choose, or are they having anxiety, or but this idea of quitting is just such a negative connotation, and I'm not sure how we undo that from even those early days.
It's an excellent point. I mean, even from a personal standpoint, my daughter had been in gymnastics her entire life. And at the beginning of this school year, she was signed up to do it again. And she showed up for the first class and she just said to my wife, look, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And she pivoted and she started ice skating and she loves it. She is more invested in ice skating than
Yeah.
she has been in any other athletic activity. And it just goes to show exactly to your point, right? When we, even as parents, allow our children to kind of be in charge of their own destiny and to just say, look, I don't want to do this anymore. What can they learn about themselves and how can they move forward?
Yeah. For me, where it shows up in my life is I've noticed that quitting has always been so hard that I always add. I want to do something new, which I want to be that scavenger ant, right? I love finding new things, doing new things. But if I don't stop doing something, then it becomes this like, oh my God, it's this overwhelming, I'm doing everything, right? So I've really tried to reframe it, not as a negative quitting, but what am I going to celebrate that I stopped doing to make space for something else because it's just impossible. There are only 24 hours in the day.
And I'll just also add to that. I think that there is this underlying belief that we can only walk away from things we don't like anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last couple of years, I've really embraced stepping away from things that I still love,
Yeah.
right? Like activities that I'm really enjoying and they're super fulfilling. And there's something else that is calling me. And so walking away from this thing that I love to explore something that I think I love a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's been really powerful and something I didn't previously think I was able to do.
Yeah. Good. That's awesome. I love that. So we've been chatting for quite some time. I wanted to see maybe before we wrap up, if you have some specific advice, tips and tricks for our male listeners out there.
Yeah. And really this is advice for all of your listeners, which is take some time to think about what do you want, right? So few of us make any intentional thoughts or progress towards actually planning through what do I want my life to look like? We are running away from things that we don't like, but not really thinking about what we're running toward.
Mm-hmm.
And retirement is great. We can be running toward retirement, but not as an escape plan, right? Because you want to enjoy the time that you have now. So I think my best advice to everybody is just really start to think about like, what do I want my life to look like? What time do I want to get home? How
Mm-hmm.
much, what do I want to be doing on the weekends? And then little by little, many people just want to, shift on a dime and just show up exactly how they want things to be. But figure out what are the small incremental steps that you can take to start making that plan, a reality.
Yeah. I love talking about it in terms of, I work with a lot of people on pre-retirement, right? What do we want to do now? So, you want to work a while longer, but let's slowly slow down and add some things. And because how many people they retire and then they have nothing? I mean, you hear story after story of people, they wait all this time to retire and then they drop dead.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Or you ask people, what do you want to do in retirement? And it's like, well, I'm going to golf and I'm going to
yeah,
read and I want to sleep. And I'm like, well, how long exactly? You're a highly motivated person. You are busy from like 7 o'clock in the morning until like
yeah,
11 o'clock at night. And then you think you're just going to, sit on a beach and drink pina coladas and read books all day. Like at some point, you're going to want to do something. So what's that something?
yeah, totally. Absolutely. All right, Michael, you are amazing. Any last minutes, anything I didn't ask you? Oh, how can people reach you? How about that?
Thank you so much. And thank you again for having me. It's been so awesome chatting. So yeah, you can go to my website, which is www.betterphysicianlife.com. I've got lots of free resources. I wrote a blog for a year. There's a podcast there where you can, listen to all the things that impact physicians. And then I have a free resource called What's Next to help doctors do exactly the thing that we were just talking about, figure out what do they want in life and how do they go about getting it. And that's free on the website. And then you can also connect with me. You and I connected on LinkedIn. Love LinkedIn. It's a
Yeah,
great area, great community for doctors where I'm Michael Hersh, MD on LinkedIn.
terrific. All right, go do some colonoscopies.
Sounds like a plan. It was great chatting with you.
All right, thanks again for joining me, and thank you to all of our listeners for choosing to spend your precious time with us. That's all for this episode of Reinventing the White Coat. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. If you're interested in coaching or in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out to me online at sharecoaching.com. Thanks for listening, and don't be afraid to live your best life.